Welcome to Salcedo Paranormal. It is Wednesday, February 16th, 2022. And today we'll be continuing our discussion about comic books and the paranormal. Going off of an event that we were going to cover last week, but we just kind of ran out of time. We'll be talking about the event called Inferno from the X-Men comics and other Marvel comics in general. So as always, to find all the episodes of the podcast, you can visit the podcast page, which is salcidoparanormal.podbean.com. That's SALSIDO. And there you can find all links to social media, ways to donate, and other ways to contact me. Always looking to hear from you all about the show, whether it's comments or questions or topic suggestions for shows, or if you have stories of experiences you want to share, whether they're your own or others that you trust, from other people that you trust. You're welcome to send those to me directly, as in the text format that I can read on the show, or if you would like to join me on the show, on the live streams that I use to record the show, you are definitely welcome to do that as well. We've already had one listener do that, and so that was a lot of fun. Hopefully we'll be doing that again at some point soon. So, anyways, I believe that covers all of that. Like I said, we'll be covering this comic book event, and I won't be doing this alone. Want to welcome Derek, the NightStocker, to the show. Hello, Derek.
Hey, James, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Beautiful, beautiful. Perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be fun. I'm excited.
Yeah. So I guess we should start off. We kind of talked about this beforehand. And of course, this event is tied to the one we covered last week, Fall of the Mutants, in a lot of ways. These two events take place one after the other, and there's a bit of a gap in between where some things happen, but I don't think they're terribly important to what we had to talk about today.
Okay, I think it was a good idea. You deciding midway through just to split it up into 2 weeks, because there's just gonna be no way we could properly cover both events in one hour.
No, we would have been here for 2 or 3 hours last week.
Yeah,
I think
exactly. But I think in like I was just trying to do a little research and stuff. I think like in the Marvel world, when they were creating this event, like the fall, they were very thirsty for a new big crossover X-Men event. So like Fall of the Mutants was basically them kind of putting in the prep work, and then maybe a few issues leading up to this, but mainly this is like Inferno. What we're going to be covering is basically the big thing they're preparing for like 3 or 4 years at that point, like the Marvel writers and artists and everything.
Yeah, I read in one of the articles that like one of the writers had, I don't know, some 20 pages of notes of timelines to keep it all straight.
Yeah,
which is just wild.
Yeah.
So
we're just gonna be covering the main. We're just covering the main continuity, but there is like a couple of like Daredevil, Avengers, like Hulk issues and stuff that like different spin-off issues that kind of tie into this too, which would have been really cool. Like if I was actually like reading it as a kid, to be able to incorporate Hulk and stuff into this. Like,
yeah, and even Spider-Man and yeah.
Spider-Man, yeah, exactly.
Yep. So what we're going to do is start by talking about one of the main characters in this event we mentioned last week, and that would be Madeleine Pryor. Now, I think to set that up, though, we have to talk a little bit about Cyclops and Phoenix, or Scott Summers and Jean Grey. Exactly. Because before this event, Jean Grey basically she appeared to die.
Do you remember how that happened? When I was looking into it, it said that she committed suicide on the moon because of the Shi'ar. Do you know what happened with that? That sounds interesting.
Well, that is part of the whole Phoenix saga.
Oh, okay.
And that is where basically this alien, almost like the power of a god, called the Phoenix Force, which is where she and other characters got the name Phoenix over the years. came and kind of merged with her when she was actually dying before from another mission that the team was on to save her life. And as this Phoenix being, that this Phoenix entity didn't know what it was like to have a physical body. And it kind of turned dark, and I believe it destroyed like a star at one point, which
And
led
that's
to
very interesting.
yeah, led to the destruction of a planet and several, I think it was several million lives.
Wow. I mean, we always talk about these entities, possibly a reason for them trying to like bust into this reality. And what happens when they do is that they want physical bodies. That's part of the reason they want these human vessels. So it's interesting. The Phoenix Force wants this. And the Phoenix itself is very interesting. It's described in different ways, different parts of the continuity. But there was just a big Avengers event where the Phoenix Force kind of like possessed all the different Avengers at different times, and they had to like deal with that. But essentially, it's like the totality of all the psychic energy in the universe, pretty much. And it's like it comes from basically the creation of the universe. It's just one of these primal forces that were born way back in the day, and it's all different continuity. Like I think right now in like the Thor continuity, they retconned it where now his parents are actually Odin and the Phoenix Force. I'm pretty sure. Like
Oh
the Phoenix Force
wow!
is yeah. I think it's very like prevalent in comics like at this moment in time too. So it's cool. We're gonna be touching on it.
Yeah. So Jean Grey basically destroyed the sun and this planet in the process, and that area was part of the Shi'ar, this alien empire,
Okay.
and so they came after her for doing that, you know, and so the two teams faced off on the moon, which is kind of funny because that seems to happen again and again.
Yeah.
And basically, as this was happening, there was a time where Phoenix kind of went into hiding within Jean Grey, but throughout the course of this battle, it started coming out more and more and
Yeah.
taking over again. And so, yes, she did. She basically put herself on top of this massive energy weapon and activated it, and yeah, sacrificed herself basically to stop the Phoenix from doing anything else again.
Oh,
Right
jeez.
in front of Cyclops, actually.
Wow.
So, um, so after that, or shortly after that, I believe he retired from the X-Men for a while,
Yeah.
and that's where he met Madeleine Pryor, and this basically it was a air, was it a plane, like a cargo plane company, I guess.
Yeah.
So Cyclops has gone through all this trauma, with Jean Grey dying right in front of him. But he meets this woman in this company. I think it was his grandparents' company that is basically identical to her in her looks, basically.
That's crazy.
And and I'm kind of going from this article here I found.
Yeah.
Once they meet, they start to talk more, and basically they fall in love. And but at some point Cyclops starts to wonder if Madeleine Pryor is the reincarnation of Jean Grey.
Yeah.
And apparently, some of this is stuff I didn't really read beforehand. Like this is before the event kind of started.
Oh, okay.
He confronts or he talks to Madeleine Pryor about this, and she is basically says she's really angry and hurt and punches Cyclops and runs away from him.
Yeah.
And,
So like, and I think at some point, Professor X tries to like get into her mind and finds out that he can't actually penetrate. She's basically the only person he can't get into her head, which is weird. That would be kind of a bad sign right away. Like why can the seemingly person without powers not be able to not allow Professor X to get into her head? It's weird.
yeah, that is strange. Yeah. So there's a series of events here that we probably don't need to get into too much, except basically, let me see here. I'm just checking this out here. So eventually so yeah, Cyclops leaves the team. Um, Eventually he so I'm just checking this out here again.
Yep.
So yeah, there's that whole problem between the two. Eventually, Madeleine Pryor gives birth to the son, basically Cyclops' son. They have a son together, which a lot of people don't necessarily know that unless you're really into the comics. And that boy ends up becoming Cable years down the line.
Yeah. That's very like I didn't realize that till this. Like I assumed the Cable was Jean and Scott's son. I didn't realize it was Madeleine's son. That's very interesting.
It is. It is. Well,
Yeah.
and most people would think, like I said, if you don't read the comics, if you didn't read the comics, you might not know.
Yeah.
So they tried to basically live like a family life for a while. And eventually, Cyclops gets a message saying that Jean Grey was found alive again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he runs off to find her, to see her, and leaves Madeleine with the baby.
What this is insane. Like it's really not a very good look for Scott, this entire kind of piece of his history. The idea that he's just going out trying to find girls that look like his dead love. Like that's a weird thing already to meet somebody who's exactly like who think is literally a reincarnated version of your dead lover, and then to completely bail on her immediately after the birth of your son, like to go find your old. That's crazy. But not a huge. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Sorry,
he's very. He's a really interesting character in that he's really good at being the like a leader of the X-Men. He's really good at basically the whole battle and tactics and all that. But yeah, his personal life has never really been all that great with with anyone.
Exactly.
So even Xavier, I mean, those two have had their issues as well.
I'm pretty sure right now in the comics, or at least when I eventually we got to do this Powers of X, House of X thing as one of these monthly events we do.
Yeah.
But they kind of teased that right now in the continuity, they didn't explain it fully, I don't think, but that right now in the continuity, Cyclops, Jean, and Wolverine have like this weird three-way relationship together. How there's always been a weird love triangle, and now it's literally a love triangle now in Krakoa. I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
Crazy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't. I don't know how I feel about that one.
No, that's weird. That's weird. It's funny though. Yeah.
So yeah, Cyclops runs away basically to find Jean Grey. And while he's gone, Madeleine and her son Nathan are attacked by the Marauders. Now that's a group of mutants that are they work for another major character that would be part of this event, Mr. Sinister, who is started out as kind of a minion of Apocalypse.
Yeah.
And there's a whole thing with him. He's basically just a villain that is obsessed with basically the perfect mutant genes. Basically, the whole idea of almost like looking into survival of the fittest, which is like Apocalypse's way of doing things, but like from a more genetic angle. And he is obsessed with, because of this, he's obsessed with the Summers and the Grey family's genes, because they've developed, and even after this event, they've produced some of the most powerful mutants ever in a lot of cases.
Exactly.
So, and after that, so Madeleine Pryor calls the X-Men for help, and they arrive and they fight off another attack by the Marauders. So she basically ends up going with them, and she meets Cyclops' brother, Havoc, and they start to get close, which is just also wild. I'm wondering if I almost wonder if like this event is almost supposed to be a mix of what can happen with the paranormal kind of messing with people, but then also just with just events that can lead people to maybe not the best decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
Then everything starts
with
happening, and boom, it gets worse.
exactly. Like with Madeline, she's tied to trauma a lot. Like like all the X-Men are. It's a lot of these decisions they make, and their powers especially like come from trauma. So it's forgivable sometimes when they make bad personal choices because obviously their lives are pretty difficult, So some of it's forgivable, but also it is kind of this weird like maybe there is some type of destiny between the Gray line and the Summers line, in that doesn't even matter if it's a Jean Grey clone or the brother of Scott. Like somehow they always end up getting together, So maybe there is some type of star-crossed nature to those two like bloodlines.
There's that, but I think there's also the manipulation of events by Mr. Sinister. Also,
True. Exactly.
he doesn't just run a team of assassins. Like he's very much into schemes and plots and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Now, so all this was leading up to the Fall of the Mutants event, where
Yep.
it is the world ends up believing that the X-Men are dead, including Madeleine Pryor. And also at this time, one thing we didn't really get into last time because we didn't have to is that due to various manipulations and media kind of stuff like that, X Factor, which is the team of original X-Men, is the public believes them to be mutant hunters that go after mutants and basically, I think it's even like they force them to register. So there's this perception, which of course it's not true, but there's that. So these two teams, one thinks the other is dead, and the other thinks that X-Men think that the X Factor is turned, and X Factor thinks that the X-Men are dead. And then when they meet in this event, obviously, there's going to be some conflict there.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I'm just trying to see if I should switch to articles here. Okay, now I think I'll keep going with this one because it mentions that while Madeleine is with the X-Men, she sees the media and finds out for sure that Jean Grey is alive and with Scott Summers.
Yeah.
Also, at some point during all this, her baby goes missing, and I don't see a lot about that, how that happens. It's just one of those other events that happens in the course of the issues. And actually, in that event in that Fall of the Mutants, part of that live TV broadcast of the X-Men, Madeleine does ask Cyclops to find their baby.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if actually did Sinister get him? Maybe that's what it is.
I'm trying to find it,
but yeah. So anyway, that's just Anyway, so yeah, Madeleine Pryor finds out about this, that the two are together, and she basically loses it. She punches the computer monitor screen, and it says it causes electrical feedback that knocks her out. And I didn't see this part. Apparently, one of the two. Now, this is where everything kind of starts to connect. Because one of the demonic beings that we talked about related to Limbo, which is the dimension that magic is tied to, Sim basically invaded her mind during while she was out cold, and basically gives her a nightmare. And in the nightmare, Cyclops shows up and tells Madeleine he doesn't love her anymore and takes Nathan away from her. Yeah. And then, it's basically a terrible, terrible nightmare.
Yeah.
And
it takes away all her physical features and stuff, like
Yes.
so she looks like just a mannequin, you know. And that's part of her. She's identity struggles, you know, because she's like who is she really? Like she has all these memories that aren't hers mixed with memories that are hers, and she's like not. Is she real? What does it mean to be real? Like, and we're gonna deal with that in the future if we do come up with some type of cloning, you know, like are clones gonna be considered real people, like real, like equally to humans and stuff. It's very interesting that they dealt with this back in the 80s. These type of topics. It's cool.
Yeah. So, okay, this is interesting. I hadn't seen that. I forgot about this part. So after this nightmare, she starts keeping the truth about X Factor from the X-Men because she's managing all the X-Men's computers at this base in Australia, and she's actually partly responsible for the image of X Factor to the X-Men anyway, of them being against mutants. She actually does. So this is kind of funny. She filters information and news showing X Factor as an anti-mutant group to the X-Men, so she only lets them see this kind of news.
Wow.
So there's your media manipulation in a way right there. If you want to get into conspiracy stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So let's see here. At some point, because of different events, Madeleine also discovers that she has powers.
Yeah.
And ends up, she and the X-Men are captured in another event, and she basically realizes she has powers, and a connection is made apparently between her and Jean Grey and the Phoenix Force. So, and then the X-Men rescue her, and after they basically get back to, I guess, Australia, Madeleine makes a bargain with one of the demons from Limbo, and this is kind of funny. It's basically Nastier, I think is how you say it, and it's spelled in this really.
Yeah.
It's N''ASTIRH.
Yeah. Which reminds me very much of the way Lovecraft presents his entities and stuff with really weird apostrophes and letter mismatches and stuff.
Yeah, so she makes a deal with this Nastier to find Cyclops and her son.
Yeah.
And to return her son to her. And of course, it mentions again that she's getting closer to Havoc, Cyclops' brother. So, so Nastier basically takes Madeleine Pryor to the orphanage in Nebraska where Cyclops grew up, which is actually a front for now there we go, Mr. Sinister's genetic laboratory. So this is what I mean. This guy is literally doing more than just leading, fighting teams.
Exactly. I mean, he's basically the kind of the X-Men continuity version of like the evil eugenics that was going on like during like World War II and everything. All these types of weird genetic experimentation and stuff that the military was doing, like the Nazis were doing and stuff.
Yeah. So basically this Nastier and Madeleine meet Mr. Sinister. Sinister tells her about her origins, which is that she is a clone.
Crazy.
And obviously this does not go over well with Madeleine. So looking, I think from there we can probably jump to the event. I think.
I there's one part when they were like digging into her mind, they saw her like her connection to the Phoenix Force, but she was kind of dressed more weird, and it kind of foreshadowed her possible like more paranormally things that are going to happen to her later on in this next event. I don't want to spoil anything, but
so there's other little things that happen along the way here.
But yeah, we can probably
move on.
Start the Inferno.
So I'm just gonna check on the chat here because last time we didn't really do that much, and thank you all for being here, and Yeah, this is
Yeah, for
this is
sure.
a lot of fun. Um, okay, yeah, thank you all. Um, so I think we'll get into Inferno here, and so this is where it starts to get really crazy in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they're very
Yes.
paranormal.
So it mentions this article on this event mentions that Sim and Nastier, they basically, in the middle of everything else that's going on with the X-Men, they plan an invasion of Earth, and
Yeah,
they basically use magic, Ileana, and her ability to make portals between Limbo and Earth. And
yeah,
that's the dimension she goes to whenever it's like the midway point.
yeah.
She,
The other world, this other realm, this
yeah.
kind of like astral dream type realm. Yeah, very cool.
So when one of these times when Magic and the rest of the New Mutants, which are at this point, they're on their own, basically because of everything going on with X Factor and the X Men. Like for a little while here,
Mhm.
they've been on their own, actually, I believe. Because Magneto
Yeah,
left because of what happened with Cypher, who was the mutant that got killed in Fall of the
yep,
Mutants. Also, funny, real quick thing about him, which is interesting. Part of what led to him getting killed is that he's a mutant, but his ability is to basically crack any language. Now
yeah.
that's great, except when you're in a fight, when you're in a battle. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
so
It,
yeah,
I'm not sure if I said it last time, but that's a pretty cool power to be able to learn your language, and the way they use it on the Hunt for Wolverine. There's an event when they're trying to find Wolverine right before the return of Wolverine in the modern X-Men comics, but he actually tries to crack the internet. He tries to like figure out if there's some type of language, some type of inherent pattern in the internet itself, and it basically like drives him completely insane. He like loses his mind basically in the event, which I thought was just really really trippy and cool to think about. Because he thought he could find he thought he saw a pattern in the internet, and looking for it really drove him insane. It's pretty cool to think about.
yeah.
You know,
He's in a way he can definitely be used for a lot of symbolic stuff here and there.
for sure, for sure.
Also,
Yeah,
just in case anyone is wondering why we said that he died and now he's back, that is a very common thing in the comics. Just about everyone
yeah. Just
that
don't worry about it.
dies comes back
Yeah,
eventually. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
I don't care for it, but it happens because money,
yeah, yeah.
you know.
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
anyway, so yeah. So basically, when Magic and the New Mutants are in limbo, um, Nastier basically takes control of it.
yeah,
Um, and it leads to this basically him making this giant portal and two other events there that is important to this to make this giant portal over New York City. And of course, once that's made and set up, Ileana can't close it. Magic can't close it because Nastier is
yeah,
keeping it open.
yeah,
Also, Madeleine Pryor was partly responsible for this portal as well, kind of from her end, from the Earth end. Um,
yeah. Because she during this time, like, didn't she acquire an ability to like summon goblins, basically, or
yeah,
summon demonic
I think
entities and
so.
stuff? So basically, like, yeah. So I think the door opens pretty much, and she's like some type of beacon, making sure everything like comes from one side to the other, from limbo to this
Yep.
world.
Yeah. She's
Kind of.
also she
And then
changes people
yeah,
into these different monsters and stuff, demons and stuff. She and Nastier both do that. Um,
yeah,
so what's really interesting about this whole invasion thing is it's part of it is all these monsters coming down onto the city, but the other part is a lot of them they're not visible like right away, but they actually take possession of people and even just inanimate objects all throughout
yeah.
New York.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it's cool. It's like kind of for like a kids comic and stuff. For it's because it's funny like the art kind of from a 2021. kind of vantage point. It looks kind of more kiddie, but then it's really like violent and kind of like people, whole families and like dogs are getting eaten by elevators and mailboxes and stuff. It's kind of this weird, like, again, like this weird kind of Lovecraftian bizarre type horror. Like it's very cool.
It
Like
is.
very,
There's
very
at
cool.
one point I remember one of the images in the comics is of this dog basically kind of getting hit over the head by a fire hydrant.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Joss Whedon uses that for there was one event towards, or not an event, but like the kind of the culmination of like a later season of Buffy, and that's probably like 2002 range, before kind of the X-Men or like the comic world in general it becomes the main pop culture. So he's using these different he pulls so much different stuff from X-Men comics, and he at one point wrote a very famous X-Men event. um, but he makes like Willow basically the Dark Phoenix at one point, and then for this one event he opens up these, he brings down the pillars of reality to merge all these different realms. And when this happens, he makes kind of lightning flashes down, hits mailboxes, hits like light posts and stuff, and those things all turn into monsters. Like he pretty much uses the exact imagery from this event in his Buffy season finale, basically.
Wow.
Very cool, which I didn't realize until you sent me this. Pretty
Yeah,
much.
and another one of the things in that story that are just they do it like you said in that kind of kid like art, but I'll never
Yeah,
forget this because it was just like terrifying. Oh,
it's
it
good art
is.
though. Good art though.
But there was
Yeah.
someone on a building looking like down at the city through one of those like binoculars, like you put a nickel or whatever in this machine, and then you can look all
Yeah.
around with these binoculars.
Oh, yeah.
And it shows them leaning into this machine and then leaning back out, and then this machine turns around and basically says, "My eyes now," and it has the person's.
Yeah.
It's not bloody or gory, but it basically like they don't have eyes anymore. Just
Yeah,
it's
it's
really
crazy.
and the elevator it just basically crushed people in it, and so just all kinds of chaos. And,
Yeah. And one quick esoteric thing with the fact that it's, I mean, obviously all these events in Marvel take place in New York. That's just one of the cool things about Marvel, is it takes place kind of in like real world New York, or in the real world that we know, kind of more than DC does. But specifically Manhattan is actually aligned to like the summer solstice. It has weird alignments, and like they call it Manhattanhenge, because like a whole big section of Manhattan is actually aligned to the summer solstice, like a Stonehenge, and it's like a long this Arcadia ley line that I talk about sometimes, that kind of connects all the major cities with like America's Stonehenge, and then across the ocean to the real Stonehenge, and it's one of these major ley lines. So I don't think it's purely coincidence that either, whether it's the Avengers movies or this event here, that giant portals open up exactly in Manhattan. Like that's kind of where they might open up in the real world if giant portals were to open up over our cities. Because of this
that's really
alignment.
interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
So, okay. So this event is starting. Everything's going crazy, basically. So this article here mentions Nastier and Madeleine Pryor. So they basically the two of them manipulate the X-Men into facing the Marauders again. Now the Marauders, keep in mind, had hurt a lot of the X-Men and X-Factor in a previous battle. That was that mutant massacre.
Yeah.
Took away, basically ruined Angel's wings, leading to him coming back with the metal wings. All kinds of stuff. So basically these two teams face off, and at this point, Madeleine is really starting to influence the X-Men and kind of turn them dark. Except for Colossus.
Blood.
So,
Because
right.
of his steel, like, which is very interesting. We talked about it last time. Like, it's weird that he comes from a family that his siblings become very powerful, like this weird paranormal type power, and then him himself is a steel thing, which is he's not able to be affected by magic in this way, almost as like some type of balance within this one family, like this type of magic force and this repellent force of the magic. It's cool. It's like creates one whole, like,
Yeah.
very cool. but they become like bloodthirsty. Everyone besides him becomes very bloodthirsty, and they attack the Marauders
Yeah,
basically.
and Colossus, because of everything you've seen, that his friends, friends that he's had for years, turn dark and bad, and he figures out what's going on as kind of a magic thing because he realizes, hey, I'm not being affected here, but everyone's, and and that makes him think of magic of his sister, and so he decides that he has to go find her because of her affinity to magic and everything, and so he has to go find her to basically turn everything right. So okay.
Now back on. Sorry, but back more towards the beginning. Is there something to do with like WizKid? Like Nastir kidnapped WizKid in the Exterminators. Because of a spell casting computer.
Yes.
That's
I forgot about the computer part, but yes.
Now that's interesting, just because the way that they use it to keep the gateway open, and that's like essentially what like the quantum D-Wave computer thing is kind of doing in reality, or to the theory. Like in the creator of the D-Wave computer, Joey Rose says that these entities, that these demons that they're trying, whatever they're trying to let in, this AI demon thing, is most most closely resembles. He literally said, "quote Lovecraftian old ones," and that's like he literally said that. That's in a speech, and it's essentially what this is like 30 years earlier, talking about some type of spell casting computer that they use to keep the gateway open. And I read that and I was like, oh my god, like that's the D-Wave quantum.
It is
computer,
interesting, yeah. And I forgot about that team, that Exterminators, because they kind of they're most people don't know them, and I didn't even know them until I read this event. But so it turns out the baby Nathan was in Mr. Sinister's labs, and so and so that's basically where Madeleine learns about her being a clone. So and basically that's where Madeleine and Nastir kind of part ways, because their deal has been honored. And after that, Nastir and Sim start fighting each other for leadership of all these monsters that are invading Earth. And so they're basically fighting for Limbo and Earth.
And like while this is happening, the regular humans of Earth are kind of just like not really paying attention to what's happening. If they're not getting their eyes plucked out by binoculars or getting eaten by mailboxes and elevators, they're kind of pretending like, oh wow, that's interesting, and just going on with their regular life. But I'm reading that and I'm just like, is that kind of what we're doing if we're living in some type of apocalypse? Like every other week we're hearing about some type of crazy sci-fi reality, just going about a day and be like, oh wow, we're living in a crazy sci-fi movie. Like, well, we actually are, and not paying attention to it.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because it does mention here that a lot of people, even like Spider-Man, when they start seeing all the strangers, at first they just think they're hallucinating. But also, if you think
crazy.
about it, and this goes back to what you were talking about with New York and everything, being the center of, they're already in the middle of so many events in Marvel. I mean, I bet you for some of them, they just kind of just try to get by and get out of the way, and there's probably a lot of people in that city, in that universe, that are just used to that. Like when you start seeing people, doing amazing things, you might just want to get out of there because, you don't know what's going to happen, or you might want to stay and watch. I mean, you see that in the comics too. People are all around, watching.
I think there's a book. It's called The Marvels, I think. But it's basically it's like a bunch of different stories, kind of all just existing around these events of just regular people, kind of going about their daily lives as stuff is going on all around them, and kind of trying to deal with that. Just people trying to get to work as like gods are fighting in the air.
Yeah, I think that series has been kind of. There's been a couple of versions of that, I believe, over the years.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right.
You're right. They'll put that one out. But so Nastir and Sim are battling each other now. At one point, and it doesn't say where Nastir came into contact with this, but when Sim starting to win, looks like it's going to win. Nastier lets himself. I think it might even be from one of the New Mutants. Lets himself be infected by
Oh,
this
okay.
techno-organic virus.
Oh yeah, the
Yes,
Transmog
which
Virus.
is
Yeah,
something that will pop up again and again in
uh,
X-Men comics over the years too.
yeah. So I have the definition for the Transmog Virus here. I don't want to get into all kind of crazy virus conspiracy.
Yeah.
We all know what's going on in the real world and stuff. But the Transmog Virus is used by members of the Technarchy to turn other beings into techno-organic beings. The Technarchy can feed upon infected beings and drain their energy. Once the energy has been drained, all that remains of their prey are brittle statues. If an infected creature is not drained of its energy, it becomes a phalanx or a phalanx. Um, they're usually all black and yellow, blah, blah, blah. And the phalanx, their true origins are unclear, but they're thought to be formed when organic life forms are infected by the Technarchy's techno-organic transmode virus. And they're like a major, major player in like the current X-Men run right now. Like they're like a Type 3 civilization to have like Dyson spheres and can harness the power of the sun. And they're basically like leading one of these like robot battalions pretty much in like future X-Men comics. They're it's cool that they're in this story or they're like have kind of subtle connections to this story because hopefully we do that we do that other story at some point in the future because I
Yeah,
think
that'd
you'd
be
like it a lot.
interesting. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
so in this, basically, even though, okay, so Nastier merges with that computer that you mentioned. Um, well,
yeah.
first he gets destroyed, but then because of this virus, and because of his magic, he rebuilds himself.
Oh yeah, that's part of it too. It lets stuff like it's harder to kill
Yeah.
stuff with the transport virus. And I love that. I love when like the magic meets technology stuff like that. That's really
Yeah,
cool to me.
yeah. So that happens to Nastier, and he starts taking more control of everything. Now, from there we jump to Colossus finds magic, Ileana. Because of all that's
Yeah.
been going on with her and this portal and everything, she and just because she's basically so much despair over everything that's been happening, she's basically turned into like a monster-looking kind of thing. Um,
Yeah.
but she also has this armor that she's covered by. Um,
Yeah.
but then when she sees Colossus and how basically terrified and his reaction to her, she goes back into limbo. Apparently, she came back to Earth because of the invasion, trying to stop it, and all those monsters are kind of urging her on to becoming more and more monster-like, more like them. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And like the her armor is called the Eldritch armor, which is cool because that's like Eldritch basically means like anything uncanny, unearthly, like supernatural. But like they also call they call Lovecraftian horror cosmic horror or Eldritch abominations. So like Eldritch is a word used to describe Lovecraftian type stuff, and the fact that like her power source, her powers are very tied to these like elder god mythology and stuff like and you're reading Lovecraft right now, like I think I find that a cool
it is.
synchronicity.
And
You know?
what other thing I mentioned, I think off air, is that if you look at the artwork of Ileana, she starts off almost like your picture perfect image of a young girl, kind of, you know. I
Yeah.
think even and that's right in the comics, Colossus, like he has a nickname for her as like his little snowflake,
Oh wow.
and then all this happens. So there's that
I know. I know.
that total complete parallel of like good versus bad, like mirror images of good versus bad.
Exactly. I was just watching before this the episode of the '90s animated X-Men show, and they had an episode in the first season of Colossus trying to save Ileana back in Russia against like
Omega
forget his
Red,
name
yeah,
like the Omega Red. Yeah, yeah. And but that's like very very young little Ileana. That's like extremely like little girl, sweet, innocent Ileana. Just and knowing now we're going to about to talk about crazy uh Eldritch Ileana was
yeah.
funny
Well,
watching
that's
it.
the thing. That's there's such a huge shift and everything. So
Exactly. Yeah.
Ileana at this point is fighting against all these monsters, and so is the new mutants. You know, they're with her, and
Yeah.
they're trying to get to her and kind of like maybe calm her down and convince her, hey, you don't have to be this monster kind of thing. And eventually, they one of the teammates in this group persuades her against, what was it? She goes to Limbo and decides to end the Magic decides to stop the invasion by becoming the leader of Limbo again. But the New Mutants persuade her against that, and so instead she gives up her powers. Magic does by creating a huge portal that sends most of the monsters, the demons, back to Limbo. So she's able to bypass the whole portal that has already been made. And then she throws. Now she has this soul sword, which is made up from her own soul, parts of it. And she throws the sword into the portal. And there's this big, basically like explosion of light and energy. And when the mutants and then the New Mutants and Colossus find Magic again, this is also kind of really interesting. They find the little girl in Liana, Magic, inside the armor, inside the remains of the armor. So it's very much almost like a rebirth kind of thing.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. And where does that? I mean, I know it's not part of the story, so we don't have to go big into it. But is that kind of a way to like give her like a fresh start, like a more simpler life again, because of all the trauma she's had? Like, kind of like, okay, we'll spare you. Like now you can be like a little girl again and have like a regular life, or like where does she go after the story's over?
She has continued problems with the Limbo and all of that energy. So it's not not right away. I think it's just another one of those things that certain characters deal with the same kind of things again and again. And so that's she does, and it could be that the writers of that event did want to give her a fresh start. But the other thing about comics is you get all different writers over the years. So if a writer does something and then the next writer doesn't like that, and if they can work the story around it, they can reverse whatever was done in an earlier story. So yeah, it's possible. There's a lot of I think both are probably possible. That's hard to say without looking into it more, which is the case.
Yeah.
So, but this does not completely get rid of all the monsters or demons, including Nastir and several of the people and objects that have been, transformed into these monsters. And this is where the two teams at this point, X-Men and X-Factor, have met during all this. And of course, they actually did literally fight because the X-Men thought X-Factor had turned, and which is to them a terrible thing because X-Factor was the original 5 X-Men. And X-Factor thought, you can't be the X-Men. You died. We saw you die on TV.
Yeah.
And also you're, at this point, from the X-Factor's point of view, you all are acting crazy. You're acting evil and stuff.
Exactly.
But eventually they kind of all stop in the middle of this battle. I think even Colossus comes back at this point to the X-Men. Which is interesting. At this point in the comics, they're starting to do that, where characters can come and go in between different comics. They're getting advanced enough in their writing where they can do that. And they destroy Nastir.
I like that.
Sorry, go ahead. Okay.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
So they destroy Nastir. But of course, Madeleine Pryor still has the basically, and that's the funny thing. I didn't realize this. the story gets its name from the spell. That's actually called the Inferno spell.
Yeah.
And this is where Madeleine Pryor really turns on the X-Men and X Factor, basically for everything that she feels that they've done. Which in some cases, again, going back to Cyclops, you know, yeah,
And you can't blame her. Yeah.
yes,
To a degree. To a degree. Yeah. But this was just her snapping pretty much. Just the culmination of all her past trauma, everything, like kind of the end of the kind of the big finale, the grand finale of everything that's kind of been leading here. She's just like trying desperately to maintain the spell and just really snapping, like really taking her big
and
villain
she's
turn
also,
pretty much.
even though the portal was closed, she actually threatens to kill her son, her baby. As again, here we
Yeah.
go,
Yeah.
more paranormal stuff. A sacrifice
Yeah.
to reopen that
Yeah.
gate
It's a
again
demonic
between
sacrifice.
Earth and Limbo.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, like does it require some type of blood sacrifice or a sacrifice of something you really love, like in the case of Thanos and Gamora? Anybody who watched the Avengers movies and stuff, like is that part of it? It requires blood sacrifice to open these gates to these other realms, very Lovecraft style.
Yeah, and so at this
Go
point,
ahead.
Madeleine Pryor, this is her first time seeing Jean Grey in person again. So this also does not help anything.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Madeleine Pryor makes a link to Jean Grey's mind and shows her all of Madeleine Pryor's life, including what she learned from Sinister. And so the X-Men and the X Factor, the rest of the teams, while there's this link between the two women, the clone and the original. There's this massive. I remember this from reading it in the comics. At this point, Madeleine, the two teams managed to break through, rescue the baby, and of course,
Yeah.
trying to take Jean Grey with her, basically
Yeah. She's just snapping, basically.
and
With
tries
snapping.
to so. They basically Jean Grey is able to, thanks to the Phoenix Force, breaks through. It breaks away and also breaks through, and in this kind of explosion of power, when she breaks through, she also breaks Madeleine's hold over, basically all of New York, everything that's going on in New York City. Everything returns to normal.
Yeah.
At least normal for Marvel, anyway.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Yeah. And I think it was able to break through just because the Phoenix Force also has that deep connection with Madeleine, like the same way it was able to get through the force field and all that kind of stuff.
So yeah, and but also, and this is also interesting, that as before Madeleine dies, part of her personality goes into Jean Grey and makes her
That's interesting.
angry at Sinister for everything. You really, if you read the comics, you really see this change in Jean Grey's attitude for a while there. She leads the two teams like, hey, we got to go after this guy.
That's cool. It's like a piece of Madeleine's soul, like really remained, and it makes you think. Like we talk about, especially on like Troubled Minds and stuff, the idea of immortality and like reincarnation and that kind of stuff, or taking one mind and putting it into a robot vessel or like some kind of created human vessel, and like what does that mean? Can we ever do that? And like the one piece we never really talk about as far as like getting an advanced technology enough to transfer consciousness. What if it takes some type of like psychic ability to do so? Like what if it doesn't just take technology? What if it takes some type of pun intended magic, in order to do this, into some type of psychic thing that whatever causes that link between the clone and the original, maybe that, like I don't think it's I think it's all kind of in this too, that this
Yeah, it's
technology
really
magic
interesting.
connection.
So, and then from here on
Yeah.
out, there's not quite as much paranormal stuff. It's just a big battle. At all this time, with all the teams not at the Xavier Mansion, the Institute, Sinister takes over and basically waits there for everyone to get there again. And basically sets off this explosion, and there's a huge battle. What's also funny about that is that may sound extreme, but if you look at the history of the comics, the X-Men's bases are always being destroyed and rebuilt, and destroyed and rebuilt, and destroyed and rebuilt.
Exactly. It's like the end of every comic or the end of every X-Men movie. They're always like rebuilding the Xavier Mansion like every time.
And that's kind of where this event ends, but with Cyclops and everyone kind of coming out of their days that they were in from all the influence and everything, and they the two teams realize, okay, maybe. I think they even figure out that it was Madeleine Pryor that was feeding all this information about X Factor to the X-Men. So like, okay, maybe that's we get it now, and then it's. And I think this event also it's part of what leads to the whole reorganizing of the X-Men characters in the early 90s. They do stay, teams stay separate for a while longer, but they start to be in more constant contact, and eventually there's a big reorganization, which they do every so often. And
that's cool. Yeah, I think right now it's all these teams. Exterminators, I don't think are around right now. They might be, but Marauders, New Mutants, the regular X-Men, obviously, X Factor, they're all still around, and Fallen Angels are a group right now too. But I don't really know much about them.
I know it's based on an original title from the '80s, but I think it's one of those minor events. But yeah. So this really had a lasting effects on the characters for a while. I mean, Magic is different now.
And at the end of the event, it says that all the human Inferno survivors are convinced it was just a big shared hallucination. So just like how many times in different paranormal stories or like Roswell or some type of giant mass sighting or mass event, do they just brush it off as some shared psychotic episode or some shared hallucination and stuff? And is that like is that true, or do we actually see some type of crazy shared paranormal event together and then they just try to brush it off? Cool. Like what the human mind can kind of like intentionally forget about or can intentionally like reason with in order to just keep going about your day.
And so, and then of course, like I said, the baby is eventually grows up to be Cable. I do agree we should start maybe like from I think I mentioned from the mid 2000s with all the events and just slowly go through each one,
That was a very good one. That's a good start point.
I think it is because it's kind of the first big complete Marvel event, and those are also the ones where it really does involve like all the major. It involves the Avengers and the X-Men. That's where you kind of start to see them really overlap more often.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
for sure.
I think that basically covers it. This was a lot of fun to look into. It brought back a lot of memories of the comics that I read. I read the trade paperback, and even if I do think if anyone's interested in this, you should go back and look at the art, because you can see the way the art changes with the X-Men, especially as they're being manipulated and they're going darker. That their uniforms and stuff, they change.
Yeah. And these artists like Silvestri and stuff, they're so just influential for this time period. But they're kind of like, these artists are the ones that kind of go on to create the image look that takes over the 90s completely. And it's I was loving it. Like the few issues that I did read were very fun to read. And like Marvel, if you're listening again, I encourage everybody to just go and get the app or go find these comics. And there's a lot of details we didn't cover. And it's definitely worth going to read them yourself.
The battle that
for sure.
I mentioned, at the end of that event, it literally was epic. Like it was not just. There was a lot of.
Exactly.
Well, I guess there was one other thing we could have mentioned is that At this point, it's Sinister reveals just how much like mind control manipulation that he did on Cyclops. Not only Jean Grey in the way that he manipulated, Madeleine Pryor and everything, but Cyclops. Like Cyclops literally had to be pushed to the edge by seeing Sinister kind of holding Jean Grey, and menacingly, basically. It took that to really push Cyclops through that, and of course the other X-Wing get Jean Grey away from Sinister, and Cyclops just blasts him, blasts him away because he'll never come back.
Yeah.
Obviously, never come back. He's done.
Of course,
he's
yeah,
done.
of course.
No, he's not.
Yeah, of course.
So, yeah. But this was a lot of fun. I'm glad we did this, and
this was fun.
I'm looking forward to. I do think this will be fun to do like once a month. I might even get that app and see if I can at least. I don't know if I'll be able to read all the comics, but at least check things out and kind of. I think some of these more like once we get past the 2000s, some of these events, we may have to rely a little bit more on you, Derek, and your knowledge of this stuff. But
oh yeah, no, for sure. But I think like I've never tried the app on the computer yet. So I think it'd be even bigger and better. But on my phone, it's still okay. But the way they have it, you just basically just click like button or next or whatever, and it takes you kind of from word bubble to word bubble, or like section to section. It gives you a full picture display, and then takes you in to every like frame, and then pulls you back out again, and then to the next page. So it has the same like kind of zoom function that you're looking for and everything. I think it's cool, and it's literally it's every single Marvel comic that exists up until like 3 months ago, basically. And those are the new So it's
by doing
I think it's
just
cool.
one of these a month, I think we'll make sure that we're never really we're never really caught up to the point where we're like 3 months,
Exactly.
So I don't think that'll be a problem either.
Yeah, and at some point in the future, we just got to do these like at least just the Powers of X, House of X thing. It's just like a 6-issue event that kind of just gives the foundation of like this new X-Men rebirth. Just because you're such an X-Men guy, and I want you to it's very, very cool. Like it was cool for me, and I'm not as much of an X-Men person as you are. And at some point we got to do it.
That hasn't heard me talking before, I found the X-Men through the 90s cartoon series, actually. Yeah.
Yes,
and that series, if you go back and listen to it, even though the action was like toned way down because it was a kids show, that series covered just the same issues, just as serious issues in that series as they do in the comics.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Mutant rights, all.
And the voice acting, for the most part, in a lot of cases, is pretty darn good.
It's great, yeah. I mean, this is I consider it to be my top 3. Like it's the Batman animated series, Spider-Man animated series, and X-Men animated series are very influential for me. And they're doing like a reboot of it with the same voice actors and the same animation style for Disney Plus. Like they're making it right now. It'll be out next year, or this year at some point.
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
Also, I think one thing we didn't mention is another thing that happens in the X-Men comics is, if you watch the movies, you think of them as being led by Xavier all the time. But he kind of comes and goes in the comics for long periods of time, for various reasons, whether it's he's injured or he's just goes out into space with the Shi'ar. Just all different things. So this is why he wasn't in the event. He was literally off somewhere else, apparently. So...
Yeah.
But I think that about covers it.
I'll do it. Yeah. Thank you again, James, for having me. This is a blast. We gotta do this.
I think once a month
will
be good. They'll give us plenty of time to pick an event and try to read as much of it as we can in our free time. Wait, what is that? I don't know what that is. Yeah.
I forget what that is. Yeah, I don't have much of that, but no, this is good. I'm pretty sure like the next event we're gonna do. I think I already have that in physical form, so it'll give me an excuse to actually finally read it. But
Yeah. Well,
I'm excited.
thank you again, Derek, for being on the show.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you. It was a blast. I'll try to take off here. Let
Sounds
me
good.
hit the mute button again.
Thank you. There we go.
Thank you, Jess.
Okay.
Bye.
So, that's gonna do it for today. Tomorrow night I will be covering. I've decided on that. It's gonna take some research to do this, but I'm gonna take a little break from the Lovecraft. Sorry, Derek, but and cover Stephen King's It. And this is kind of inspired by again mentioning Troubled Minds Radio, a show that happened last night. So that should be fun. It's a long book, so it'll definitely be the whole episode that I covered. That I take to cover this. So that'll be it for tomorrow, and then Friday I'll be doing more of the haunted sports venues. Friday night also, as far as I know right now, the plan is I will be on Shift Happens on the Fringe FM. Talking about the paranormal, my experiences, and then just see where we go with the conversation from there. So that should be fun too. So thank you all for being here as always, and have a good night. And I'll talk to you all tomorrow night on the next episode of Salcedo Paranormal.